About today, we're going to talk to you about what we do. We'll quickly sum up what we said last year, show you a short extract of what we're working on, tell you how we made this, and then talk about what was unexpected and what we hope to do in the future. So what we do is mostly TV series, but also commercials and theme parks, movies and such. We're a studio that have been around for 17 years now. And we work as a production company and also as a service company. For now, we have 3 big projects that are upcoming. 2 of them are our productions, and the other one is our case study for today. It's called Mush Mush and the Mushables. It's produced by La Cabane Production and Thuristar. And the other ones are Pirates and Tango Animals. Those 3 series are 52 times 11 minutes, and we will do them in Blender 279. Last year, we were just integrating Blender to our pipeline. So we were doing stuff with the sets, the set dressing. We also had integrated Blender to the pipeline in order to save and load files easily and put them in the right place, and also some animation tools. So I invite you to see the video of the Blender conference if you want to dig more into that. And there you go, my friend.
So we are now going to show you an extract of one of the TV shows we are working on at Cube. It is called Mush Mush and the Mushables. It is produced by La Cabane Production, and it's distributed by Cake Entertainment and Thuristar.
Maybe now is a good time to run.
Totally!
Run!
Sure! Let's hide in there!
Now what?
Staying here is good.
Yeah, but if the wasps are around, then it means that Star Mush isn't far. You guys don't move!
So, thank you, guys. So today I will take you through the process we chose to create the assets and the shots of our TV series. And I will present to you all the workflow and every tool we use from early asset creation to our final renders. So let's start by the beginning. How do we make an asset? So in addition to Blender, we use other DCCs and external plugins, because in this very early stage of asset creation, it is still fairly easy to take a model and its textures from one software to another. So artists at Cube are free to choose the software they want to work with. But of course, as soon as we start working on shading, everything has to be brought back to Blender and Cycles. And I'm sure, as most of you guys, we heavily rely on Blender add-ons, so both external and in-house one. The one on the far left is called Paint Clones. It was created by Stephen Ledger, and we contributed to this tool by adding a few options. The 2 other ones are more of in-house workflow helpers, which are very linked to our pipeline and our way of doing things. The one in the middle helps us be efficient while painting particle density maps in order to create our rich background in the forest that you saw. And the one on the right helps shading artists be more efficient by importing light sets, for example, and helping them deal with the automatic generation of multiple resolution textures. So next come rigging. And while working on a TV series, it implies very specific needs in terms of character rigging. First of all, we tend to keep our number of animation controllers very low to make sure that things stay simple and straight to the point for our animation team. And we also care a lot about viewport performances. One more thing, we wanted to maintain the user experience we had in 3ds Max when we switched to Blender, to make sure that our animators wouldn't have to learn a new workflow on top of having to learn a new software. So all those reasons led us to create our own auto-rig solution. As you can see on those images, it works as any other auto-rig. You start with a template that You then scale to fit the proportion of your character. And then in one click, a fully functionable rig is generated. And all that is left to do is adding the specific features of your character and skinning, of course.
What we wanted to do when switching to Blender, we wanted to improve our data flow. It's something that is shown here. Actually, when working from one task to another, you want to be able to move the data easily. And when we were working with 3ds Max, we were more or less working only with work files, and we wanted to change that thanks to refining our pipeline by switching to Blender. So what we do now is we have a process that is called the push process, where when an artist is done, he just hits the push button and selects the different type of data that he wants to output. This is then put into one place, a place that is shared by every task of the asset or the shot. And then it can be a lot of different files, JSON files, LMX files, or blend files. And what this allows us to do is that we can have different level of details, for example, for the maps or the shaders or the geometry in one click, and you don't have to have that present in your work file. And also, this is not a straightforward process. The dotted line shows it. It's actually a cycle, because rigging needs modeling, for example. So once the modeling is done, then it pushes, and the rigging pulls it. And what's practical about this is that all the data is in one place, and it's known that this data is ready for the rest of the pipeline. It doesn't mix with working data of the artist.
So, how do we make a shot? How do we make a second? Let's start by the beginning, the layout. So first of all, our layout artists have the choice to work either at shot level or at sequence level. And either way, all the necessary assets are automatically imported into the shot as they are listed in a technical breakdown. They come in layout version, which means they have a very basic rig with only 3 controllers for translating, rotating, and scaling their object. And these help us ensure that things stay very responsive and light at layout stage. And as most of you may know, multi-object editing and multi-armature editing was a new feature of Blender 2.8, but we are using on this project Blender 2.79, and we still wanted to be able to animate multiple characters at the same time. So this is why we have a script that merges all the armature of a shot into a single one, so that animators and layout artists can select multiple characters simultaneously. Then, if the layout artist has chosen to work at sequence level, he has to create all the cuts and camera animation. And when this is done, his scene is automatically splitted into several files, each one corresponding to a single shot. He can then dive into one of those shots to add more detail, refine his animation, or add more detail to the set dressing. So then after layout comes the animation, and the first thing an animator should do is replace the very basic version of the rig by the fully animatable version. And as Valentin told you, thanks to the push-pull workflow, in one click, the animator is able to profit from the latest available version of the rig and can start working on top of what had been done in layout. So one of our animation tools I want to talk to you about is called AutoWalk, and it allows animator to load an animation cycle into their character, such as a walk cycle or run cycle. And all they have to do in order to do this is create a spline along the path they want their animator to, the character, to follow, and then animate the speed of this character along the spline. The speed of the animation cycle will then automatically adapt to make sure that the feet will properly stick to the ground. And as you can see in this video, you can also include or exclude specific limbs of the character, such as an arm, his head, or one of his hands, to add another layer of animation on top of the cycle. Next, we have one of the most important tools in animation at Cube. It is called the Animation Bank. So it's a library that contains a huge number of poses, expression, and pre-animated actions that the animator can load and insert into their scenes. Not only it helps us be more efficient, but it's also a very good way to normalize and lock key expression, key poses, to make sure that we maintain the consistency among the animator teams, and that this consistency also exists throughout the animation of the 52 episodes of the series. And you can see in this video how quick and easy it gets to create a custom pose for one of our mushrooms. And the last animation tool I would like to talk to you about are those custom pickers. They come with each of our rigged character, and they help animators select bones in animation controllers in a very intuitive and straightforward way. Because as you can imagine, when you work on a scene with multiple animated characters, sometimes we have more than 10 in a shot, the viewports quickly get crowded with controllers. And the cool thing about this tool is that those 2D versions of the characters are drawn by our rigging artists. They do that in Adobe Illustrator, and if they name correctly every layer and every element of the design, once they export their work, the picker will automatically know which bone to select when you click on one of its parts. So of course, then when you've animated a shot, you want to see a preview of it. And our pipeline lets us do that in multiple ways. So first of all, we can choose between an OpenGL preview if we want a quick result, or a cycles render if we want to see our animation with the proper lighting or the final 3D depth of field. We also can choose between rendering the preview on the artist's computer or to distribute it on our render farm. And as soon as the animator wants to make available the animation data so that the next teams, such as lighting team and rendering teams, can work on it, he can push this information, which is written as Alembic files, so that other people on the pipeline can work on the same shot, even if the animation is not fully finished and validated yet.
Schematics guy. So what we wanted also to do is to automate as much thing as possible. And what goes on from animation to rendering is quite automatable because there is not much of an artistic thing to go there. So there is this thing when the animator is done, in the render farm, a huge series of scripts goes on. The animation is pushed, as Tanguy said, and everything that was pushed previously for each asset is gathered, the geometry, its shaders, its position, and its animation. And there's also something that we had to do with Blender 2.79 because it's hard to load and save rendering settings, especially compositing trees and render layers. So we have a small library that serializes this into JSON files. So supervision and supervisors, they make their templates of render layers configuration and compositing tree also, and then everything is gathered into the render work file. It is saved, and the rendering artist can just start working without the hassle of having to import everything when starting to work. What is done is also we are working with Houdini for the FXs, so everything that has been pushed for the animation phase, the Alembic files are used into Houdini. Then VDB are exported, Alembics also, and they are brought back to the render rogue file. And what we do is we split our renders into the several render layers that we need. I'll go back to that in a few moments. And then there's compositing that is done in Nuke.
So as you can see in this fairly simple compositing breakdown, our compositing process is fairly straight to the point. We chose to render a 3D depth of field because we wanted it to be pronounced and fairly realistic. And we also add a few atmospheric elements from the 3D scene, such as the light rays you can see in the background and small dust particles floating in the air. On top of that, we add dust and smoke effects coming from Houdini as OpenVDBs. And in order to be able to do that, we took the 2.78 Blender branch from Tangent Animation because they implemented OpenVDB support in it. And we only kept the changes related to that feature and brought them back to our version of Blender, which was the master branch at the time, 2.79. And in that way, we could benefit at the same time from OpenVDB feature, of course, but also from the latest features added by the Blender Foundation, such as Cryptomatte and the principal volume shader.
Okay, during this process, we discovered a few things because nothing never goes as expected. So, first of all, last year we were quite confident about how much stuff we could put in our scenes. Our first background tests were concluent, but actually, when we were doing our real rendering with all the animation and all the stuff, we realized that scenes were too big. So we decided, for example, to render all the sets into a spherical image so that we could swap the actual geometry for this single image when possible, and most of the time it's possible. So it made us gain a lot of time. What we also did is this layout at the sequence level. Actually, it's something that we did on 3ds Max before, and it were very efficient. But for now, within Blender, we don't have tangible data that proves that it is very helping us to go faster. But it's a process that the artists can choose to use or not, so we just let them choose if they're comfortable with it or not. And one last thing is that, as Tanguy said, we had to merge all the armatures because our animation director asked us to do so in order to be able to animate in the quotas that are from 7 to 9 seconds per day per animator. That's quite heavy. So you have to be able to select all the characters at the same time. But what we realized is that when you put all the characters into the same armature, at some point there is too many controllers and the selection buffer of the viewport overruns and you cannot select all the controllers. So what we did is to group the characters geographically. If you have 3 characters in one place and 2 in another, then you have one armature for those 3 and another armature for the 2 others. And this made us change a lot of things in our tools because most of the tools were knowing that there is only one armature in the scene, and we had to change that because now we have several armatures in our scenes. Also, what wasn't expected is that since it's a small close-up project with a lot of nature and a lot of mushy things, we put SSS almost everywhere, and it was very, very beautiful. But actually, when we were rendering things for real, we realized that it was very long to sample and also tends to stay a bit noisy, and we had to remove SSS from most of our assets. And that's something that is too bad because it was really beautiful with it, but it cannot be rendered into series time. We have to render almost 11 minutes per week of footage, so it's not possible to do so. And also what we realized is that when you use GPU rendering, and you have more than 2 render layers, most of the time Blender crashes from switching to the second to the third layer. So we had to write a small tool that allows us to give a flag to Blender just before rendering, and it just switches the 2 layers that we want and set up the scenes for that. What is next? First of all, we're very proud, very excited to use Blender to make images with it. We think it's a great software, and we're really eager to go onto that. We want to improve our workflow, our data flow again, because we know that this first project is a first pass, and there we have 2 other projects upcoming, and we want to improve all our tools and all the way we work. There is one thing that is not in Mush, but that is present in the 2 upcoming projects. It's shading animation for the faces, so we want to deal with that also and to put this into this whole push and pull and automated pipeline that we are working on. And there is also something that our artistic directors are asking, is that they want to be able to have a palette of colors for all the assets, so that you can have one background with a lot of props and characters and say, I want this ambiance, and you don't have to update all the shaders to do the work twice, you just want to switch the colors. So we'll have to work on a shading, templating way of doing things, and that's going to be interesting. And also, we are eager to switch to Blender 2.8, but we know that it won't be soon because our projects are very long, they are 1 or 2 years, and we cannot afford to change versions between projects, of course, while we are working on a project, sorry. So we'll have to wait the right time to do so and to revise the scripts and the tools, so we are sure that they're working in Blender 2.8, and then we can switch to that. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to add that we are really eager to share as much as possible with you guys also. So right now we are deep into production. There is not much things that are shared, but we will share as much as possible as soon as we can. Thank you.